Hello everybody. I'm Francine. It's a pleasure to be here with you this afternoon. I feel a lot of energy in the room and online as well. So thank you very much to you all for joining this session on technology, innovation, and public goods, digital public goods in the fight against corruption. I'm very happy to be here with you on behalf of UNDP, together with our friends in Sweden and Norway who are co-hosting this event with us. I'm sending the best regards from our UNDP administrator, Mr. Achim Steiner, who has had to go back to New York for some pressing engagements. So we've heard a lot today about the power of digital transformation to accelerate the Sustainable Development Goals, to transform our societies, our communities for the better, and also about the role of digital technology in the fight against corruption. But we've also heard today a lot about the risks and limitations of digital technology, and specifically some of the challenges that it poses to decision makers, to policy makers around data privacy, data protection, trust, human rights, issues around the abuse, violence, and misuse of digital technologies. And we've also heard about the risks associated with rising inequalities between the haves and the have-nots, and the risks of a growing digital divide. And we're hopefully coming out of COVID now. We saw the benefits of digital technology in what was an unprecedented time, unprecedented strain for individuals, for societies, and we saw how much digital public goods can help mitigate crisis, help people to sustain themselves. But we're also painfully aware of the rising inequalities that we see. UNDP has documented these rising inequalities that we've seen since COVID in the last 2 years. Again, between the haves and the have-nots, which is also about access to digital technology. So today's session, this afternoon's session, and I really hope it's going to be an intimate, dynamic, interactive session. I'm going to be a hard moderator, getting people to keep to their time so we can have a Q&A with many of you. But today's session is really to get a little bit more practical, a little bit more concrete than we've been so far about the role and benefits of digital technology in the fight against corruption, but also some of those limitations and risks that we've heard about, to hear the recommendations and insights and learnings from concrete action on the ground in the fight against corruption and the use of digital technology in that fight. So that's what we've got in store today. Before we discuss with our panelists, I'm going to hand the floor to a colleague, Bjørg Sandsjø, who is the State Secretary from Norway. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Francine, and good afternoon, everyone. Both here, good to see everyone here in the room, and I'd like to welcome also those who participate and are with us online to talk about really pressing issues. It's been a great first day today. We've heard a lot about challenges, but of course also about solutions, and it's great that we'll be able to discuss that in this panel as well, that Norway is very pleased to co-host together with UNDP and Swedish Sida. So looking back at several decades of good governance and anti-corruption, we need to admit that while progress has been made, results are not satisfactory. But there are some very good promising avenues for action that I would just like to start by diving into and highlighting. First, as Francine also mentioned in her introduction, digitalization and also modernization of the public sector. We see how partner countries all over the world now request support to modernize public sectors to leapfrog decades of trial and error in governance reform and to go digital. Technology in itself is no silver bullet, but we have seen that research supports the claim that this is the area where we, as the international community, can support governments with the best return on investments. Norway is involved in this, and I would like to say that Norway remains committed to support innovation and digitalization broadly across government functions and across sectors. Second, to the first, digitalization, modernization of the public sector. Second, we will support countries in implementing obligations under the UN Convention Against Corruption. Implementation does come at a cost. We know that next year the UNCAC celebrates its 20th anniversary, and it's amazing that we have an instrument that is almost universally accepted among the world's countries and states. But we also know that we need more efforts to implement and to make the convention come alive. So this week, Norway has enhanced our cooperation with the UNODC through a strong cooperation agreement. And digitalization, again, is at the heart of this support. So UNODC, with this Norwegian funding, will embark on an extended cooperation with open ownership and open contracting partnership, boosting the capacity to respond to the need for technical assistance in areas such as the very key area of beneficial ownership transparency and public procurement transparency. And we know that these are the nuts and bolts of a digitalized national integrity system. And the good news is that lots of countries are requesting this kind of support, that there is interest to improve in this area. And my third and final area that I would like to mention is that we will invest in knowledge and innovation. We don't have all the answers to questions about how to promote digital government. So I'm very proud to introduce the partnership that we have with the UNDP Global Anti-Corruption Program, which is now housed right at the Oslo Governance Center in Oslo, Norway. In this program, UNDP runs innovative pilot projects in 11 countries on digital governance. And through that, we expect to learn what works and scale successful projects across all government functions and sectors in the next decade. So Norway is proud to work very closely with UNDP and USAID and a number of partners in the Digital Public Goods Alliance, supporting the Digital Public Goods Charter. Through this collaboration, we believe we are shaping the future of digital transformation in an inclusive, safe, and transparent direction. In closing, let me emphasize again that Norway is committed to advancing transparency, accountability, and integrity in the global financial architecture, as well as at the country level. Sometimes the same digital and transparency solutions are needed for multiple purposes, such as to prevent and combat corruption, environmental crime, illicit financial flows, and tax evasion. So I look forward to our discussions in the panel, but for now, I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. There's a lot of people in this room, but there are a few more chairs up front if people standing in the back want to come and find somewhere to sit down. Okay, we're now going to turn to our panel, and it's going to be a really interesting panel. I'm going to, as I said, ask the panelists to keep to 5 minutes max, so that we can have time, a good 20 to 30 minutes for Q&A at the end of the session. And colleagues online, colleagues here present in the room, please start thinking about your questions. So I'm going to turn first to Emmanuel Ugirashebuja, who is the Minister of Justice and Attorney General in Rwanda. Welcome, it's wonderful to have you here. Rwanda's done a lot of work to improve delivery of public services, largely through digitization. One of the good examples of that has been the work that you led within your Ministry of Justice on e-courts. So I wanted to hear more, Minister, about that work and what the lessons that you've learned are.
Thank you very much, and let me begin by thanking UNDP for having made it possible for me to attend this conference. Let me begin by asking this provocative question. We are all here in this conference trying to fight against corruption. So the meeting is about anti-corruption. So the question is, if you are anti-corruption, what are you for? What are you pro? It's always good to understand what you're fighting, but you also have to understand what you are for. So when pondering about this question, I concluded that all of us are here because we are pro a safe and just space for humanity. That's what we are trying to achieve. So if that's what we are trying to achieve, the question becomes, what are the means and what are the ways to achieve this goal? Because it's so much, you can only achieve so much by understanding what you are fighting, but you also have to understand what you are for. And this is where we began when we were discussing about the e-courts. We looked at what we were for as a country, and we decided that in order to achieve this just and safe space for humanity, in that particular area of courts, then technology could help us achieve that, especially access to justice. And together with our partners, UNDP in specific, we sat together and looked at the technology that can help us achieve that goal of having a safe and just space for humanity. In the context of courts, of course, there are so many other interventions that you can undertake. And technology came in handy because we sat together as the chain of the rule of law and decided that, yes, it's important to have technology, but this technology should be integrated right from the time when, if we take criminal cases, from the time when cases begin with investigation, all the way to when someone reaches that level of leaving what we call now correctional services, whether that individual will be able to go back to the society and contribute positively to the society. So this technology helped us integrate this system in order to deal with the question of courts. But as it has been pointed out by so many today in the conference, you have to begin by understanding your identity, that your identity is to create a safe and just space for humanity. And then technology becomes a tool among so many other tools to help you achieve that goal. And this is what we went for as Rwanda. So technology has helped. And I can explain that in terms of combating corruption. There's a lot that you can do, but that particular move of using technology in itself combats quite a number of corruptions that can take place within the system of the justice sector. I can give you a simple example. Before the advent of technology, it happened, and I speak to some of my colleagues in Africa, it was quite clear that cases were registered manually. And if a registry was used manually, you'd have the first case registered as number 1, and then the second case registered as number 10. So in between, you have to corrupt if you want to have your case heard very fast, because they are numbers 2 to 9, which are empty and which will be given to you in case you used corruption. But if you have this system, an electronic system, then it is the system which gives you the date without it being corrupted or given money. And then another key example of where digitization of court services has been extremely key. just to conclude, I'm sure I'm still within my 5 minutes, is in the judgment writing. It did not happen in my country, but before I became a Minister of Justice, I was also the president of the East African Court of Justice, which is a regional court, which brings together judges from different jurisdictions. So I was speaking to one of the judges from one of the jurisdictions in East Africa, and was telling me that before the advent of the use of technology, there was an interesting phenomenon where a judge would write their judgment using pen and paper, then give it to their secretaries. Then the secretaries sometimes will know of course, they'll know the outcome of the judgment, and they'd approach the winning party, the lawyer of the winning party, and tell them, if you want to win this case, then you have to give me some money to corrupt the judge. But they already know the outcome, so it wasn't corrupting the judge. But it was actually quite interesting. But now with e-judgments, that cannot happen. You've already taken away that possibility of corruption in that area, because judgments are now e-judgments written in the system. And you do immediately take away that part of corruption. So there are many examples that I can share with you, but I don't have enough minutes. Only to say that, yes, and I can't corrupt the moderator to give me more minutes. So only enough to say that the first element that you should look at is your identity. What do you want to achieve as a society? Where do you want to go? And then establish processes, some of which will be technological based, some human based. It depends on different societies. And then you will see the outcomes. You don't, if one parting advice is concentrate more on the systems rather than the outcome will take care of itself. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you, Your Excellency. It's good to hear the concrete examples that really bring it home and really illustrate the power of digital tools. And then your other point about needing a vision from the beginning of what you want to achieve. So I'm now going to jump to the end of the row and ask Mr. Islam, who is the Cabinet Secretary in the Government of Bangladesh, to tell us a little bit more about what you've done in Bangladesh in terms of the development of a grievance redress system, some of the challenges and results that you've achieved in this work. Over to you.
So thank you very much. Actually, the pilot technology enabled grievance redress system to be increased in grievance filing over the previous analog means by 75% around, and redressal by 98%. And moving forward, we are converting our web-based, phone-based, and social media-based grievance redress system into digital public goods for many developing countries to adapt and adopt. We have already converted 2 products from our UNDP-supported ETY program as digital public goods at the DPG alliances. So the introduction of the grievance redress system through digital means has really created tremendous impact in the practice and mind of the general people. Every day as a top administrator of the country, I have been actually receiving so many grievances through online, and those are coming far from the country. I remember that in 11th of November 2010, I went to the remotest island of the country, just on the face of Bay of Bengal, along with Ms. Helen Clark, who was then the administrator of UNDP. And you simply cannot imagine the remote communication to that place. Now, those people are also getting all kinds of support because of the establishment of the Indian Digital Center there and getting benefit of all kinds of services. And moreover, they can actually file whatever they want, they feel to be short or they feel to be aggrieved of. So we instantly get it and we can instantly send it to the respective authority to address. Moreover, responsive software has also been inducted along with the grievance redress system, for which the man who is actually raising the grievance can also see where it is and how long it will take. If it does not go back to him in time, then he again actually raises it to us so we can intervene. And more precisely, if you talk about the digitization of the whole process, then I can assure you that I myself was involved in implementation of some of the mega projects in my country over the last 9 or 10 years. The smallest one was within around 1.4 billion, and the highest one was more than 3.5 billion, which is the bridge on the river Padma, a very ferocious river. And that has already been termed to be one of the most complex structure ever to be built on Earth. And we use these digital means, and we observe the highest level of compliance. We actually follow the international contract provision, free contract, and the FIDI gold, which is actually regarded as the highest level of compliance. We complied everything, and not a single question regarding the quality and as well as corruption was raised by anyone. We completed all those projects, and just 2 weeks ago, we completed a big tunnel under the river Karnafuli at the face of Bay of Bengal. And you will be surprised to know that after actually completing such a big project, our all international consult, everybody became surprised that there was not a single claim left for the contractor. It became successful because we used everything to be digital. And everything was transparent, everything was given into our website. So we are also aware that I have to be accountable under my authority. All project officials, everybody was on toes, and they were very much aware that they would have to be accountable. And if they make any mistake, intentional or unintentional, it will actually go to the public. So in addition to my JRS, I also like to say it again that yes, that is decided. Of course, there may be some way to go, as our first respected speaker told. But at the fourth, above all, I think that despite having all digitization, my personal experience of handling good governance over the last 12 or 13 years is that we have to implement the national integrity strategy to the highest level. That seems to be the best. Whatever may be the system, if the character of the individuals are not purified, I think all system will ultimately give some bad results. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Islam. And I think the example that you gave about the grievance redress system in Bangladesh, such a vast country with such a huge population, including in remote rural areas, how you've been able to use digital technology to really do that outreach so everybody can participate is really a very, very strong example. So thank you for that. I'm now going to move to Delia Rubio, Chair of Transparency International. As Transparency International Chair, you've been advocating for citizens' rights to access to public information, full whistleblower protection, and the adoption of new forms of technology to increase transparency and accountability. Can you share your thoughts with us on how digital tools can effectively be used to promote information and citizen engagement and, strengthen that civic space that we know has been shrinking? Thank you.
Thank you, Francine. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Some initial remarks. Tech, as Emmanuel says, are tools. So the key issue here is how we use these tools, because they can be used for good and for evil. First thing. Second thing, in terms of implementing or regulating the use of technology, we have to work closely with the tech community. Because one thing is from the outside saying, okay, yes, this program is perfect, it is working, we are delivering justice or rewards or whatever it is, but we, as persons not specialized in technology, don't know what the software has embedded in. And as some technology can be used to deliver better or more efficient services, they can also be used on purpose or without being on purpose, can be used to discriminate, generate, instead of inclusion, exclusion of parts of the population, or simply being generally biased. And that requires the tech community to help us. And it requests us to work with them in order to guarantee that they are aware that when they create these kinds of tools, they have to do it in an accountable way, taking care of the risk. For instance, if you are using machine learning systems, which are the databases you are using to create these algorithms? Because if the database is old, is incomplete, or whatever it is, the results will be awful. But that requires that the tech community works with us. For the positive side, what can we achieve with tech tools in terms of fighting corruption? Obviously, the facilitation of access to information. If you have to go to an office, present a paper, sign, and ask for information, and come back to get the information, of course, that's a complication. We need to have online information, and these technologies can help people access the information. It also facilitates citizens the reporting on corruption. In some countries, we have heard examples this, in one of the plenaries this morning or this afternoon. That's facilitating the participation of citizens in accountability activities. So that's good for anti-corruption. We can protect data from manipulation and fraud. For instance, if we use blockchain as a basis for land registers in countries like many African countries where there are problems with land grabbing, you can guarantee that the registers are more safe than when it's just paperwork done by an official that can be involved in corruption. So that's great, and that's blockchain. In some countries, it is used for civic or civil registers of people, birth, etc. That's great, but blockchain is the technology used by cryptocurrencies, actually used by organized crime in order to circulate their money and to unduly influence politics and manipulate country politics in many countries. So it's the same tool used for two things. One, very good for anti-corruption. It can help to detect patterns of suspicious conduct. That it is very difficult if an accounting office has to go contract by contract, looking at who are the bidders, who are the awardees of the contracts, etc. If you have big data tools, these patterns, these red flags, can very easily launch the investigation, let's say, start the investigation, give the clue to the officials to investigate something because there's a pattern that it is repeated in cases of corruption. We can also use digital technology for auditing some infrastructure projects. In Latin America, for instance, we are using drones in order to detect, in case of very big infrastructure projects, how it is being developed and delivered by the contractors. And that's technology applied to the accounting and the oversight of infrastructure projects. We can also use this technology to facilitate access to information in terms of contracts, public procurement, in terms of campaign finance, in order to know who is behind each of the candidates. We can use it for transparency in terms of contracts. In particular, during COVID, many chapters of Transparency International work to facilitate the population the opportunity to know what contracts has been signed, how many resources has been applied to buy ventilators or vaccines or whatever it is. And the only source of information in many countries about that was what civil society organizations did. And still in some countries, that's the only base of information in COVID contracts. That's what we call it, COVID contracts. And of course, in investigation of grant corruption, technology can help because the cases are so complicated, so entangled with corporate structures to hide who is who and what is the relationship, that there are software that can help investigators and civil society to detect the connections and the networks, and this facilitates, of course, investigation. But again, I think that what we cannot do is to delegate in algorithms the decision or policy decision making, because that's a risk, really a risk. I think that humans should be at the steering role when we apply these systems in order to avoid this kind of biases or problems. We can solve ones, but technology creates new challenges in the fight against corruption and in the fight for human rights.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. And I'm now going to turn to Mr. Akmal Burkhanov, who is the head of the Anti-Corruption Agency in Uzbekistan. Now, since 2018, Uzbekistan has launched, I think, some ambitious reforms.
Yes, 2017.
Thank you. 2017, ambitious reforms in terms of advancing the anti-corruption agenda. You established an anti-corruption agency. You've promoted strategies and programs to fight against corruption. We'd like to hear a little bit more about those reforms and the challenges that you faced along the way.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, dear participant, dear colleagues. As we all know, the transparency, accountability, and anti-corruption are key to achieve all the sustainable development goals, and particularly SDG 16 on peace, justice, and strong institution includes key elements on ensuring access to justice, building effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions, as well as reducing bribery and corruption. The Republic of Uzbekistan, in turn, having determined for itself a firm intention to fight corruption without compromise, fulfilling its international obligations in the field of combating corruption, ensuring openness and transparency in the public sphere, and uses the capabilities of information technology to the fullest extent to achieve set goals. In particularly, today, in order to ensure transparency in the activities of state bodies and organizations, the list of 35 types of social significant information to be posted regularly as open data, which in turn created a good opportunity for public control. We consider the procedures that enable the public to obtain information about the public administration as a major transparency measure that facilitates the exposure of corruption. The practice of broadcasting live via the internet all court hearings, sessions of the chambers of the parliament, and other types of examinations and activities where corruption risks can be detected has been established. The system of providing public services to the population has been fundamentally reformed, as well as licensing and permitting procedures have been improved. Nowadays, for today, more than 350 public services can now be provided without the human factor through a special electronic portal. For example, I can give one example. 5 or 6 years ago, to receive the passport, the citizen of Uzbekistan should spend more than 1 month and you should collect more than 10 documents that prove that you are a citizen of Uzbekistan. And for each time, you should go to the office, state bodies, and receive documents, more than 10 documents, and it spent more than 1 month. And sometimes, if you, for example, if you hurry up to go somewhere overseas, you should give bribe more than 10,000 US dollars, and you could get for 1 day, for $10,000. But after establishing this online system, you can get the passport without any human factor within 15-20 minutes. And my colleague from Rwanda is emphasized that in this area, the system, it should work. I mean, the integration of the system is very important, and political will in this area, political will of all state bodies is very important. And what important, openness index in Uzbekistan based on 8 indicators and 84 evaluation criteria was introduced in Uzbekistan, and activity efficiency is divided into green, yellow, and red categories. The index aimed at evaluation of the effectiveness and efficiency of the work to ensure openness, where 21 of 84 criteria related to introduction of digital technologies in the activities of state bodies and organizations. The platform for online training of employees of state bodies who are in charge for ensuring transparency of the activities of relevant agency has been launched. And similarly, to access information laws, proactive sharing of data by public institutions facilitates the detection of corruption. In Uzbekistan, for example, an online and open data system called e-procurement was launched to ensure that documents and information related to all public procurement would be easily accessible to public. And every citizen can see, can oversight the whole public procurement process. Overall, making information easily available on topics such as tendering processes and public spending encourages NGOs, journalists, and researchers to scrutinize data in sectors that are often vulnerable to corruption, such as police, defense, education, or healthcare sectors. It should be noted, however, that also transparency is critical for exposing and discouraging corruption. Transparency alone is not enough to reduce corruption sustainably. To ensure that transparency alleviates corruption, it should be accompanied by measures for strengthening people's capacity to act upon the available information. And once again, I would like to express my gratitude to all organizers of the conference and these sessions, including UNDP, for this opportunity, and wish everyone a wonderful 5 days full of new adventures, new experience, and new friendships. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Akmal. I think we all got a sense of the absolute ambition, of the total overhaul of your system and how you've integrated digital technologies to really fight against corruption in the delivery of public services. So thank you very much for that. Again, very, very concrete example. I'm now going to turn to Emilia Díaz from the International Consortium for Investigative Journalists. And I was looking on your website this morning, and really impressive investigations have been conducted in recent years by ICIJ, including in relation to Panama, Pandora, and Paradise Papers. So we really want to hear more from you, more details about the technological tools that you've used to analyze data, to detect red flags, to connect the dots between what must be, millions and millions of different documents that you've collected. And, are you using AI? You asked that question this morning about, who knows about AI in the room. So are you one of those people? Are you using AI, and what other technologies are useful in your work?
Well, thanks very much. Thanks very much for the invitation. And yeah, I will bring a different perspective to the panel, which is the journalism side. So how do we use what is available from public sources, and also what we get as journalists sometimes from whistleblowers and other sources to investigate corruption? And I will use as an example Pandora Papers, because I think to talk about the tools, we need to understand the problems we have. So when we get Pandora Papers, we are talking about 11.9 million records, those in different shapes and formats. So we had millions, actually, 6 million documents that were many PDFs, some of those 10,000 page long, and inside those, some financial information or information that could lead us to identify who the final owner of a company is. Then we had images, emails. Only 4% of that information was structured. And that was only the beginning of that story. So first step, and one technology that we use, has been developed by our tech team, which is called DataShare. It's open source. And it allows us to put all these millions of records in this tool and makes them searchable in a secure way. And it does actually have a component of machine learning, AI, NLP, actually, which allows us to detect and extract automatically names of companies, people, and location. So that is a starting point. But that is just, I would say, the beginning of the problem. I will close this so that we don't have, that's a long story. I will keep it short. So the beginning of the problem. Then we need to organize this information and structure this information. So we use a mix of technologies. And in those documents, we have sometimes manual records. So then we need to have manual work to extract that information. We do use AI, for instance, to detect in documents that can be useful inside there to extract information about ownership. We combine spreadsheets. Then we use a collection of different programs to basically put order to that mess. And still, that's the beginning. So how do we get from those millions of records to information on 29,000 beneficial owners tied to 27,000 entities across the world? And then how do we get from those to more than 330 politicians and public officials that were using offshore entities, among those 35 current and former country leaders? And what they were using these companies for? Were they tied to court cases? Were they tied to corruption scandals? Have they declared these companies or not? So that's where we start connecting the dots with public records. So we go, and then we go to corporate records. We also use tools that have made public records available, or connecting and organize information, such as Open Corporates. We also use Sayari, Dow Jones, Factiva. We use Nexi. So we try to go to all these spaces to start connecting the information and seeing, is this information authentic or not? And then validate that information. Then once we have done that, is what are these companies used for? So we have structured that information, and something that we use besides DataShare is another tool called, we use graph databases. And with that, we use Linkurious and Neo4j. That's the softwares behind what we use. And that is, we want any journalist to be able to use data without having any data skills. So when we are analyzing, let's say, we're looking and connecting our information with open corporates and see did companies move from Panama to other jurisdictions? Then we want to confirm what happened with those companies, where they declared. So what happened after we have published an investigation? So we do different levels of work. And in that sense, we use advanced programming, we use machine learning, but that has a human factor. So that is the problem there. So when we are using machine learning, we have lots of humans, lots of reporters, detecting what are the key documents that are behind what we're trying to find, which are the financial statements, loan agreements, and so on, to start following the money. So we teach the computer, but then the computer can learn things wrong. So we have lots of processes validating the information that we get. So, and once we do that, we do analysis. We also use machine learning to recognize documents that were not useful for the investigation, like to recognize trash among the millions of records. So that's part of that process. And then comes that other part of reporting, going to human sources. So we are not only using the technology, we have a network, like in the case of Pandora Papers, we counted with more than 600 journalists in 117 countries and territories mining that information and getting like the outcomes of like the results that our data and research team has done, share data with everyone, make data available, how we put structure and order to that mess, to then continue the reporting and talking to human sources that can help us connect the dots. So we don't only connect the dots using technology, we connect the dots using humans and the best sources on the ground. There is still a lot of information that humans have that the computers don't have. So we combine the best of human power, people is one of our secret sauces, with the best of technology. That's our other secret sauce. And, and then a lot of validation and fact-checking. People talk a lot about technology. Our team spend a lot of time validating the information. So once you have extracted information, you need to verify that that information is correct. And sometimes what we have seen, I remember another project that we worked on, FinCEN Files. We were looking at addresses to see illicit money flows, so transactions that were flagged as potentially suspicious transactions. We discovered that about 60% or more of the addresses had the wrong country code. So if you're anyone looking at those reports, and you're trying to trace, and you automate it and said, oh, let's look at the country code. China and Switzerland shared the same country code, and that happened with many other countries. So then if you don't have humans looking critically at that data and the results you get when you're analyzing, then you get the things wrong. So it's not only about the technology, but it's about being critical to the technology and the results we're getting. And that's how we end up finding our stories. That's just the beginning. But those are some of the tools. I'm happy to talk more. I don't want to go super technical, but if anyone has more questions about the technical aspects of that, but it's a mix of those two elements.
Thank you so much. So the secret is in the mix of people and technology and the validation and getting people to help connect the dots. Very good. All right, so now, colleagues, everybody's been really good. And so we have plenty of time for Q&A. So we've got colleagues being monitored online. If colleagues have questions online, we are collecting those questions. And I can see a number of hands being raised in the room, lots of hands. So goodness gracious. All right, I'm going to start 1, 2, 3, and then we'll go to this side.
Okay, thank you. My question is for Your Excellency, the Minister, regarding something that was brought up in the panel before about the safety of judges. Has e-courts has any impact on that safety, or have you analyzed being more, like the judge being more of a number, not a face, so that he's not exposed, because Rwanda is also, for example, in sustainability aspects, it's very, very rich in that aspect. So there are many powers that are hunting, not for rhinos, but for judges, so that their causes don't get a bad, how you call it, they get the result that they want. That's what I meant.
Okay, thank you. And then it's the gentleman with the mustache, and then there was
Thank you. I have never been described like that before. Yeah. Hi, I'm Diego. I work for INL in Ecuador, and my question goes to Emilia. One of the main things one of the main problems we face in Ecuador is that there is a lot of information, but the main challenge is to analyze that information and to start connecting the dots. So in your experience, which software has been like the most effective in order to do that?
Okay, great. And then one more behind, yes, the lady there. Yeah.
2 mics going your way.
Yeah, thank you. I don't have a mustache yet, so my question. My name is Dilmira Matekubo. I'm from Uzbekistan. I'm based in the UK. I'm from the organization US Investigations, where we investigate corporate and state power. My question is to Mr. Burkhanov, and it's very obvious and very genuine question as a civil society member, as a citizen of Uzbekistan. You talked about the tenders being transparent, open, and there has been website open. Yeah, I agree with you, there is a website. But we know that whatever is published there, you know, it's the tenders that are available, there's already agreed. And those are big, you know, high-profile ones on the big projects, for instance, land grabbing project, we call it, and we have a huge project on that. Those are not available, those are not on the website, and that's just clear-cut, and citizens know about that. We're talking about Tashkent City, many, you name it. So we're talking about the role of technology, right? Citizens have improved their, you know, literacy, digital literacy. They start reporting on corruption, whether it's petty corruption or grand corruption, or grand corruption related to land grabbing. But what we see in practice, though, those who are reporting on corruption end up in jail, and for a long time, or intimidated or harassed, or sort of, you know, eliminated from the public domain. You know, they're not able to run their activities anymore. Whereas the perpetrators they're reporting on, they're still free and they just carry on their work. So I want to really know what is the role of the agency in tackling that or looking at that. We know that the, you know, Uzbekistan is known as a kleptocracy. So in that context, how do you approach, I mean, what do you do? What's the role of the agency in addressing kleptocracy in Uzbekistan? Thank you.
Thank you. And on this side, so 1, 2, 3. Yeah. One was. Anya, do you want to go first? Yeah.
I'll talk about introduction of technology in Bangladesh, where we had to actually resort to alternative definitions of corruption. So when we introduced anti-corruption using technology, we actually had to define, and the Minister of Justice from Rwanda talked about what are we really going after. So we said that we will reduce time, cost, and the number of visits to access public services. So that's how we reduce corruption. So that was a clear definition of what we were going after, not what we were anti. And we reduced 12 billion work days, $16 billion, and 7 billion visits in about 10 years. So that's how we measured. Then when we introduced the Right to Information Act, we also had to figure out that how do we actually measure? And then we introduced a national portal with 50,000 offices with proactive information disclosure. So again, an alternative to just the law itself did not really help. So we had to make it much more concrete. For public service capacity, we actually had to introduce what is called empathy training to do design thinking using technology. So again, we actually had to define things very concretely and allow experimentation of how to reduce corruption using technology. So just wanted to know from maybe Uzbekistan, from Rwanda, and any other panelists, if you had to define something very concretely to combat corruption with technology. It's not. Corruption is very immeasurable. I mean, it's very difficult to measure. But then if you can define what you're after, just like the Minister of Justice from Rwanda said, I think that's easier to attack. So if any other experiences would be very helpful. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Alena Vandashova from Transparency International Russia. And I'm really wondering, so the question is to all panelists who are ready to answer. It's not a secret that some authoritarian regime use digitalization as a shield. So on the one hand, it's easy for them to show, look, we are here, we are really good in openness. We have open registers, we have special databases, you can use it. On the other hand, they can use it as a shield for further pressure towards civil society. And that's what we call digital concentration camp, right? So the question is, what is your attitude toward this phenomena? And the second, what do you recommend to civic activists in such challenging conditions? Thank you. Who was the next?
Thanks. Liz David-Barrett from the International Anti-Corruption Agency. My question is really for the government panelists. So I was inspired by something that Akmal said around if you do one of these big government digitalization projects, then you need political will of all state bodies. But you didn't really tell us how you achieve that. So I think the technical side of these digitalization projects is already pretty complex and requires a lot of resources and technical assistance. But that political will side seems to me the more difficult part. And I wonder if you could just tell us perhaps share some stories about how you overcome those problems.
Thank you very much. All right, so we had, and I don't think there are any questions online, are there? We don't. No questions online for now. So we've had 6 questions. I'm going to throw it back at the panelists, and whoever wants to speak first, please keep your answers short. Perhaps we can go through everyone.
The last question actually she raised.
No, wait, please take a mic.
The last question she raised regarding the goodwill of the government, I mean the political government, whether they will really go for the digitization or not. But in our country, it did not happen. In 2009, the whole charge was given on us, and we are at free, and we are at liberty to go for the digital Bangladesh. And we actually raised that campaign, and up until now, we had no interference. And Mr. Rani actually gave some statistics regarding the success of the digital Bangladesh. And the most important aspect of digital Bangladesh is that the rural people are getting more benefit out of it rather than the urban people. We had some difficulties in making it digital in urban area, but we did not face any problem in the rural area. So that is the actually the best part of our digital Bangladesh, that we could actually give benefit to the rural people. So I again come to the point that we had no interference. Rather, we are given full freedom by our Prime Minister. You do whatever you like to. But she gave us 2 themes: service at the doorstep of the people, service at the fingertips. This is the 2 themes I give you. Now you do whatever you like to. And whatever money you need, you just get it. Sometimes whenever we face some problem in expenditure, money was transferred to my another, I actually opened an official account, and money was given to my account so that we could spend it very easily. So in Bangladesh, we did not face any interference from any political or government, state level. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think the political will from the top was very clear in the case of Bangladesh. And I like the doorstep and the fingertips. That's great. Yes, please, Akmal.
Yeah, there were some questions about the procurement system and the persecuting of persons who reported the corruption cases. You said that some procurements in Uzbekistan are not open to the public. Yes, before 2021, not all procurement procedures were open to public, especially you mentioned some projects, some big projects in Uzbekistan, but at the end, in the end of 2020, we established a new law on procurement, and from January 1st, 2021, all procurement procedures must conducted via electronic platform. But and from this time, any person can see and can monitor all ongoing procurement processes. And yes, but in Uzbekistan, in legislation, we have still some exceptions. These exceptions is provided for the president and for the government, head of government, prime minister, that some projects via the decree of the president or via the decree of the prime minister, the procurement can give directly, but the percentage of this procurement are less than 10%. But now the agency is trying to abolish this procedure also in legislation. there is still a problem. And one more problem is that, yes, we can monitor, we can oversight the all public procurement via the portal, electronic portal, but now we cannot see the final beneficiary of the public procurement. So after the announcement of the procurement, there is some information that some procurement is given to the well-known person and so on. So now our agency is working now on the new law on openness of the final beneficiary, and if we can adopt this law, any person can see the final beneficiary. And if the final beneficiary is the same in one public procurement, they are automatically restricted to attend to this public procurement. And the second question about persecuting of reporting corruption, I'm not agree with you with this because from 2020 we adopted the law on protecting the whistleblowers on corruption, and the agency is responsible for this law. And from 2021, all whistleblowers are protected by the law, and even for whistleblowers, the state, the government is paying now. It not only protecting, but also we are paying for them. And I think that in this regard, no problem. But we still have a opinion that if you whistleblow, if you inform about corrupt, you could persecute. So that is why, for example, this in 2022, we received only 50 or 60 information about corruption. But in Uzbekistan in 2022, we have more than 5,000 corruption cases. But the information is very less. So citizens still afraid to inform. But we already adopted the law on protecting whistleblowers. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I think you raised an important point at the end there, which is that people need to feel confident and trust that the system is working.
Yeah, it regards the last question also on political will, because from 1991 to 2016, Uzbekistan was like a under authoritarian country, and there were no political will. So after the new president, second president after independence of Uzbekistan, the president came with his new strategic program, 5-year program, and the first of his job was the establishment, adopting of the law on combating corruption. That was the main political will. So even now the people afraid that they remember that time that if you inform about something, so you can persecute. But now, yeah? Yeah, what cases about this corruption reporting? Which case? Huh? Otabek Satori is not informing about corruption. He is the blogger. It's another cases. We should. No. Yeah. It's not the corruption case. It's the human rights case, and that case is quite different case. It's not regard to this issue. Okay, this topic. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Akmal. Delia.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. It's an interesting answer because like the question is, well, which software is the best? And I would say, again, what is the problem we have? And actually, something that we have learned at the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, like so on the journalism side, is the power of collaboration. We have multidisciplinary teams. And some problems that we have with data, sometimes, like if you look at data, if you want to connect the dots across data of governments, sometimes they don't follow the same standards. Sometimes they don't have same identification number. Sometimes it's hard to see if it's the same person or not because you don't have unique identifiers. Sometimes some of them don't update the information. So sometimes you have governments that have efforts some years and then those efforts are gone. So some registries are open, some registries unfortunately now are there's a closing, which is concerning, and it's affecting the work of investigative journalists. So it's not as simple as just what tool, is what quality of the data you're dealing with. And there is not a same standard across the world. So we also deal with data in different languages. So, and you're talking not only like different languages, different characters sometimes, and how do we translate that and connect that information? So for all that, you need critical thinking and figure out, well, which programs can you use better to translate languages? And then which programs can you use better to connect the dots? Which programs, so it's not a single thing. So for instance, some of our developers, as I said, we have multidisciplinary team, love Python. So there are lots of programs that they build, like so coding, that they do themselves to help us analyze and help connect the dots with those millions of records. When it comes to ownership information, like corporate ownership, for us, graph databases have worked very well because it helps us figure out like how a company is connected with many people. We have actually made publicly available some data that has resulted from our investigations that is called through Offshore Leaks database. And the format that we have is actually in a graph databases, but it's also downloadable. Other problem we have is not all information that is available online is structured, or like sometimes there are plenty of PDFs, so that represents a total different challenge. Is the information downloadable or not? Can we query the information to the websites or not? So I would say depending on the problem and what your question is, then the program that you can use. So the best thing is the power of collaboration. So I would suggest you can find partnerships with universities that handle, like if you don't have resources, like that have great computer science teams that know very well about the different tools, and you can bring that out of critical thinking. In our case, we have done that, and we also have in our team people with different skills. And when you bring different skills to the table, then you get the best tools.
In the same line, I would say that collaboration is essential because we don't have that knowledge. So we need to work with the technology, with the tech community. The chapters of Transparency International have worked with programmers, for instance, in order to create tools that then were given for free to the authorities, for instance, in terms of money and politics, how to report how much are the parties receiving, who is the donor, et cetera, et cetera. And it was, for instance, in Colombia, a tool created by our chapter with the help of the tech community. So after trying that for several years from the civil society point of view, in order to facilitate information before the election, to know who is paying and then who is going to collect the favors afterwards, the chapter give for free the tool to the audit authority in terms of money and politics, the Electoral Commission, for them to use that tool created by civil society with the help of those who can create or select this kind of tool. But I would comment on two things. When governments are using this kind of technology, they are gathering data from the population. With the COVID, it was absolutely clear. Many countries resort to registering your temperature, et cetera, all day long. Well, in that case, we have something that is beyond technology, which is how to protect the data that was collected. And how are we going to guarantee that the use of the data would be that announced by the government? Because we are seeing nowadays, after COVID, that the information about where you live, how you move, where you go, et cetera, is used in some authoritarian regimes in order to surveil the society to use it as a surveillance tools, and also with some retaliation on the activities, particularly of human rights defenders or anti-corruption activists. So we have to be very careful about that. And again, the use of the technology and the use of the information gathered through this technology in the hands of governments. Of course, to the question of concrete examples, I have given you the one on political finance, but in general, beneficial ownership transparency, and really last 10 days ago, the European Court of Justice in one day destroyed the work of activists and civil society working for transparency in beneficial ownership. And in one day, the court decided that privacy of an unknown person, owner of many things, should be protected against the public interest to know that. So again, that's a good example of how we have advanced with technology, with open registers accessible to the public, that's open, online, verified information, accessibility of the information, interoperability of the databases, and in one day, we are again, the information is protected under the veil of privacy. So we have the tools, but we are not alone. I always say that fighting corruption is not a marathon, where everyone goes in the same direction and nobody is throwing stones at those who are running the marathon. It is chess playing. It's a strategic situation. So we are not alone on the chessboard. And the decision on the court shows clearly that the bad guys are there playing against us. So we have to be aware of this.
Yes, thank you very much for the questions that were posed. There is one that was posed directly to me, the safety of judges and technology. In the context of Rwanda, I would say that Rwanda has taken the choice of ensuring that there is safety and justice for everyone. I'll give you a personal example that no minister or judge or members of parliament have a police escort. We drive ourselves to work because it's an environment that we've created for every Rwandan, including judges, so we don't need to have that particular security. Rwanda has been chosen as the safest country in Africa at the moment, and that's why we don't need the extra police security. But generally speaking, as a tool, and we've kept on emphasizing that technology is a tool, and just like any other tool, before you use it, it's neutral. A knife, if you use it properly, you can use it to prepare the ingredients for your dinner. But if you use it badly, it can be a murder weapon. So with technology, it's just the same. It's neutral. If you apply it in a harmful manner, then it could lead to harming judges generally. But I would say that judges are actually much more safer now, where you apply technology. As I earlier pointed out, the corruption that may occur when someone knows the decision of a judge before the decision is made. It used to be much more easier when it was manual because it had to be spread through different people. But at the moment, the judges have a space where you don't know what judgment they are going to make before, because they are in charge of their space as judges when they are writing the judgments. You only know of the judgment once it has been posted on the system, or it has been read by the judge. Because the time, as a former judge, I will tell you that the time when the question of safety of a judge comes into question is before they make their decision. Once they've made their decision, then there's no reason to harm that particular judge unless you want to harm them so that they don't make a similar decision in future. But in that particular decision, once a decision has been made, then the judge is safe. So you have to ensure that in that process, a judge is much more safer. But I would say that compared to how it was when manual judgments were being made, and I'm talking about the region that I come from, and due to many other reasons, I think judges are much more safer. Because again, with technology, it's much more easier to report to almost the whole world about someone who is in danger at that particular time, and it may lead to safety of that particular individual. So I do believe that technology has played that important role. About political will, that's a very tricky one, because I think developing a political will differs from one society to another. In one given society, you might have a leader who is pro-change, pro-reform, but that's not always the case. Sometimes political will has to be forced to the leaders, and this is done by the electorate, the constituents, or other important stakeholders such as the civil society or the journalists. So political will can be created or developed in different ways. Maybe I can give you an example of how in the justice sector in Rwanda, the will towards using technology was achieved. All the key elements or all the stakeholders in the justice sector sat together and looked at the budget that is used to develop different technologies for their own use. Technologies which wouldn't speak to each other. And when you looked at the budget was enormous. But when the rule of law stakeholders sat together, from investigation all the way to the courts, we decided to pull together the budget and came up with a committee chaired by the Chief Justice. And we decided that the same platform which is used in the courts could still be used by the forensic laboratory to feed in information which can be accessed by the judge, or investigation department to feed in information which can be accessed by the judge. But of course, with securities and ensuring who is permitted at what time and at what level. And this committee came up with a secretariat to look at this integrated system, which would be able to access all these other systems at different levels. And when we looked at the budget, we decided that this is a good idea. So that's where the will came from, using the budget efficiently in order to have an integrated system that achieves the end goal of justice. So that was how the will was developed in the justice sector.
Thank you, and thanks for a great round of questions. I thought I'd briefly just respond to the question that was raised by the colleague from Russia about the risks involved. And I mentioned earlier that technology is not an end in itself, and other colleagues have been even more eloquent in saying that you said technology is neutral. It can be used for good and for bad. And there certainly is that risk, and I think it's important for all of us to be very aware of that and to make sure that when we digitalize, we also look at our privacy legislation and we look at other accompanying digitalization with that kind of legislation changes to make sure that we at least have those systems in place to protect privacy online. And I thought that my colleague from TI who talked about the importance of working with the tech community, because some of clearly open source technology, digital solutions are really important in trying to further what we're trying to achieve. But then making sure that we know what's in that software so that we don't make mistakes. It's a very good reminder for us. I just wanted to reiterate that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I'd really like to thank everybody for their questions. There are more questions coming in, but I think we're going to sort of wrap up now. So I'm going to ask Ms. Sarah Taxon on behalf of Diana Janse, State Secretary for International Development Cooperation in Sweden, to give us her closing remarks.
Thank you. So my name is Sarah Taxon, and I'm reading this remark on behalf of Sida's Head of Policy Support, Christina Hartler, and also Sweden. We see corruption as one of the biggest obstacles to poverty reduction and sustainable development. And anti-corruption efforts must therefore be a priority on the political agenda and should be approached through a systematic integration of anti-corruption into all development areas and sectors. And both the UNDP and Sida use this approach repeatedly. And the key to reducing corruption is the use of innovation, technology, and digitalization. The electronic empowerment of citizens, e-governance, and artificial intelligence can both prevent and expose corruption. So Sida uses innovative technology and digitalization throughout our cooperation. And let me just mention a few examples. Until the Russian aggression, Sida has been a key partner in Ukraine to support e-governance development. Public service delivery has been improved through a technical solution that ensures secure data exchange, laying the basis for digitalization of service provision for citizens and businesses. Many administrative service centers across Ukraine are connected to the system, which enables them to function as one-stop shops for public service delivery. And this work will also be of great importance in the reconstruction process. We also work together with UNDP to support transparency, accountability, and anti-corruption through technology and innovation in many countries. In Sri Lanka, we support the development of a digital citizen engagement tool to report illegal environment practices. In Liberia, Sida has been involved in the development of a digital e-platform for corruption reporting by citizens. And then Sida support to the organized crime and corruption reporting project OCCRP provides innovative technology to expose organized crime and corruption across borders. Open source tech tools developed by OCCRP enable journalists to follow the money, identify webs of relationships, and accelerate public access to information. So through its network and technology, OCCRP has managed to unveil some of the largest corruption scandals during recent years. So summing up, anti-corruption, innovation, and new technology will continue to be prioritized by us. So many thanks from Sida and Sweden for this workshop.
Thank you. Okay, so that just leaves it for me to say a few words to wrap up. I think there are sort of three key points that I wrote down from listening to the, I think, fascinating discussion. I think the first question was around this: how do you create change, and the importance of having that political will, that political vision. Now that can come in different ways. It can come from the top, or it can be kind of brought together by working across government and with civil society to bring that level of change. But I think a clear point was the importance of human decision-making, of strategy. I liked your analogy of a chessboard to bring that change. That's humans who make that change. I think the second point was around collaboration and partnerships. We've heard a number of times the importance of working with the tech community, of interrogating and validating and working together on this fight. And then the third point I heard was around working as a system, not on individual discrete projects, but really working in a systemic way interoperability of systems. You used the word chain and looking across the whole chain and how you address corruption. So working very much in an integrated way, I think that came across very well. Working as a network, I heard, as well as a whole ecosystem. So that just leaves me to say thank you to our wonderful panel for all your contributions, your lessons, your insights from your experience. And I'd also like to thank our audience for your questions and your attention throughout the session. Thanks a lot. Good night.